How's it going, guys? It's Chris Salazar here with Lobo Off-Road, and today we're going to be showing you how to install our HNT front bumper on the Ford Bronco, as well as one of the additions that we have for the HNT is a light mount that is somewhat universal for many different lights, from rigid, diodynamics, Quake, and even KC we've seen incorporated into this bumper. As you can see here on the table, you have our 1/8 inch bumper shell, our 3/16 bumper mounts that have multiple tie-ins to our D-rings, the 4 screens, as well as our hardware kit. In the center of this, you can see is the universal light mount with the hardware kit that will be coming with the mount. In the kit, you will see that we have an option for parking sensor grommets, as well as plugs. So if you don't have sensors in your front bumper, then we have an option for you to choose that'll incorporate plugs. In addition to that, we have button head Allens to attach the screens to the bumper shell, as well as zip ties to zip tie up your wire harness for the parking sensors. So starting with step 1, we're going to remove your factory bumper as well as the wire harness from the bumper itself. So step 2, we're going to go ahead and install the factory harness into the bumper shell. This came out of the capable bumper, so you can see that the plug is actually parallel to the sensor itself. So we will be installing the step side to the outside of the bumper shell in both the centers and the outers. After doing so, you can go ahead and install all the grommets in, all the sensors, and then go ahead and zip tie up the harness accordingly. One thing that we did add was a zip tie down points. In the HNT bumper, we have this additional one, as some of the wire harness have a lot of extra slack, so you can actually roll the harness up to keep the slack out of the way or getting caught in something right here. As you can see here, we taped up the factory plugs to the fog lights that are incorporated in the capable bumper. We just do this just to prevent any potential shorts or corrosion. Moving on, now that all the sensors are plugged in and taped off, we're going to go ahead and provide enough slack to where the harness is not pulling on the sensor plug, and we're going to go ahead and zip tie it all up. So now that we have the wire harness in the bumper shell, we're going to go ahead and prep the bumper mounts before we install them on the frame horns. So by doing that, what we're going to do is we're going to take the nut clips that are provided and go ahead and install them on all the bumper mounting shell points. This particular point will be used if you are not using our aluminum skid or winch skid. If you are using our winch skid or aluminum skid, you will attach the nut clip to the skid plate itself and not the bumper mount. Moving on to putting the bumper mounts onto the frame horns themselves. As you can see here, this build does have our HNT aluminum skid, so we are going to put the nut clips on these 2 holes first. Now that that is done, we're going to go ahead and take the bumper mounts themselves, use the factory bumper bolts to go ahead and mock it up. One thing that we want to do to help align the bumper mounts is use the skid plate to help align the bumper from left to right to center, as well as line it up and down. If you do not have our skid, then you're going to have to mock up the mounts and kind of measure from the outside of the vehicle or pick some points to help center the bumper. You do not want to tighten these 3 bolts all the way. You want them snug enough, but where this will not move on its own, but loose enough for you to be able to physically move it around. You want to do this to the other side as well, and then put the bumper shell on. Because as you put the bumper shell on, you may have to adjust these left to right, up and down to line it up. As you see here, we have the bumper shell just resting on the mounts themselves. Try to center the D-ring to the cutouts of the bumper shell for the D-ring, as well as line up the bolt holes. go ahead and tighten down the shell to the bumper mounts. Do not put Loctite on them yet, but go ahead and snug them down. After that, go ahead and torque the bumper mount bolts to the frame horns. So now that we have the bumper mounts Loctited and torqued to the frame horns, we can go ahead and remove the bumper shell and go ahead and put the screens on. And if you did get the accessory, go ahead and put the light mount in. Now that we have the bumper mount bolts Loctited and torqued, we can go ahead and remove the bumper shell and go ahead and put the screens in. If you are doing our optional light mount, go ahead and leave this screen out as well as this bottom screen. The bottom screen has to go in after the bumper shell is already on the vehicle. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and install the screens with the provided button head hardware. You will need a 2.5 millimeter Allen, and then go ahead and put some Loctite on the screws. Go ahead and install the outer two as well as the top center if you are not utilizing the light mount. Now that the bumper mount is attached to the frame horn, Loctited and torqued, we can go ahead and move on. This particular build is going to have the light mount, so what you need to do is you need to get a crescent or some type of leverage and slightly bend this tab out of the way of the bracket. This is only if you're putting the light mount on. After doing so, you can go ahead and install the light mount bracket itself. One recommendation that we do have is that you feed the bolts from the inside going out so that you do not catch yourself or the light itself on the excess threads of the bolt. Now that we have the light mount tight, for you guys that are using it, go ahead and install your lights and go ahead and get them wired before putting on the bumper shell. Now that we have our dually XLs installed, we're going to go ahead and install the bumper shell. Now that we have the bumper shell mocked up, you can go ahead and put some Loctite on the 10 millimeter button head Allens that we provide and use the 6 millimeter Allen wrench to go ahead and do the final tighten of the bumper shell. So the next step after the bumper shell is fastened to the bumper mounts is this last screen. So you're going to take the last screen, tuck it up in the front, slide it over to the side, and then it'll drop into place. Then you take your 2.5 millimeter Allen and go ahead and fasten it. Now that the lower screen is in, the final step is go ahead and plug in your factory wire harness into the Bronco itself. That will conclude our HNT front bumper and light mount install. Hope it was helpful. Now go out and enjoy it. Make sure to hashtag Lobo Off-Road so that we can see all the good content you guys are creating. To find out more, go to lobooffroad.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Lobo Off-Road.